The phone buzzed on my desk, breaking my concentration as I reviewed budget reports for the upcoming quarter. I glanced at the screen. Ben's name flashed across it. Strange. My 13-year-old son should have been in school, not calling me in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. Mom? His voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. Grandma and Grandpa are here. They're moving all our stuff into the garage. I sat up straighter, my grip tightening on the pen in my hand. What do you mean, sweetheart? They said we don't need such big rooms anymore, that we should be grateful to have a roof over our heads. They're making them into offices for their business. Mom, they're just throwing our things in the garage, like trash. My blood ran cold. Eleanor and Howard. My in-laws had always been overbearing, but this was a new level of audacity. 3 months ago they had moved in with us, claiming they were facing temporary financial struggles with their real estate firm. My husband, Daniel, always the dutiful son, had insisted we take them in. It's just until they get back on their feet, he had said. Apparently temporary now meant permanently evicting my kids from their own rooms. I'll be home in 20 minutes, I told Ben. Don't argue with them, just watch and remember everything they do. I ended the call, gathered my things, and strode out of the office, my mind racing. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. While they were busy claiming space for their failing company, they had no idea who had recently taken control of it. When I pulled into the driveway, I spotted my 10-year-old daughter Lily sitting on the front steps. Her backpack was beside her, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her face lit up when she saw me, but her eyes were filled with worry. Inside, Eleanor was directing 2 movers, instructing them to carry my kids' desks into the garage. My son Ben stood near the door, his fists clenched, as he watched his belongings disappear from his own room. Eleanor turned when she saw me, a smug smile stretching across her face. Oh, good, you're home. We're making some much-needed adjustments. I stepped inside, my eyes sweeping over the chaos. My kids' things, books, posters, furniture, had been tossed into boxes, piled carelessly in the hallway. The children really don't need that much space, Eleanor continued breezily. Howard and I, on the other hand, need proper offices to manage our company affairs. I ignored her and walked into what had been Ben's room. Howard was already setting up his laptop on my son's old desk. The walls, once covered in posters of his favorite baseball team, were now bare. His bookshelf had been emptied, its contents dumped unceremoniously into plastic bins. The garage is perfectly fine for them, Howard said, not bothering to look at me. They're young. They'll adapt. We need this space for important business matters. I let out a slow breath, my voice calm despite the fire burning in my chest. Important business matters, I echoed. Exactly, Eleanor beamed. We have clients to impress. We can't have them meeting in some cluttered little corner. Presentation is everything in real estate. Lily appeared in the doorway, her voice barely above a whisper. Where are we supposed to do our homework? She asked. The garage doesn't even have a table. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. Oh, for heaven's sake, use the kitchen. When we were kids, we didn't have these luxuries. This'll teach you some humility. I wrapped an arm around Lily's shoulders. Why don't you and Ben go to Aunt Rachel's for a few hours? I told them. I'll come get you later. Once my children were safely away, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. 3 months ago, when Howard and Eleanor's company, Hudson & Co. Realty, started showing signs of financial instability, I had done some investigating. What I found was years of reckless spending, poor management, and shady bookkeeping. And so, I made my move. Through a series of silent acquisitions, private investments, and a little strategic maneuvering, I had secured a 51% ownership stake in their company. Howard and Eleanor had been so busy pretending to be successful that they never noticed their empire slipping out of their grasp. I pulled up my email and started typing a message to the board of directors. That evening, I sat across from my in-laws at the dining table, watching as they laughed and enjoyed the meal I had prepared. As they sipped their wine, Howard casually mentioned a big meeting they had the next morning, one that would determine the future of their business. I smiled. Oh, I know. Eleanor looked at me in confusion. What do you mean? I set down my fork and leaned forward. Because I'll be leading that meeting. Their faces paled. As of today, I continued, I own Hudson & Co. Realty. You see, while you were busy stealing rooms for my children, I was busy taking over your business. I stood, placing my napkin on the table. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go move my children's things back where they belong. And just like that, the tables had officially turned. I attached the photos of Ben and Lily's belongings, now carelessly tossed into the garage, to my email. If there was ever proof of poor leadership and reckless decision-making, this was it. I clicked send. The board would have everything they needed to reassess the direction of Hudson & Co. Realty. Before I could even close my laptop, Eleanor swept into the kitchen, an armload of files in her hands. The kitchen is a communal space, she announced. We'll need it for client meetings tomorrow afternoon. I shut my laptop deliberately slow, keeping my expression neutral. Tomorrow afternoon? I repeated. That won't work for me. Howard scoffed from the doorway. Your schedule? He shook his head. This isn't about you, Natalie. We need to rebuild our business. A little sacrifice from everyone is necessary. I finally let some of my anger seep into my voice. Sacrifice? You mean like forcing your grandchildren into an unfinished garage? Like throwing their belongings down the stairs as if they were trash? Is that the kind of sacrifice you mean, Howard? He puffed up his chest, his face reddening. Now see here. No, I cut him off, my voice sharp and unwavering. This is my house. My name is on the deed. You are guests here. Guests who have dramatically overstayed your welcome and have the audacity to throw my children out of their own rooms? Eleanor laughed, that same condescending, grating sound that had irritated me for years. Please, she said, we're family. Family helps each other. Right now, we need these rooms more than the children do. It's for the greater good. My phone buzzed. A new email notification popped up. The board had received my message and scheduled an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Perfect. I met Eleanor's gaze. You're right about one thing, I said, gathering my things. Families should help each other. Remember that tomorrow. Howard frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I simply smiled. By this time tomorrow, they'd finally understand exactly who they were dealing with. As I left to pick up Ben and Lily, I could hear them arguing in the kitchen, no doubt plotting which other parts of my house they could claim next. Let them plot. By tomorrow, they wouldn't own a single thing worth claiming. The next morning I took my time getting ready. I chose a sharp charcoal suit, the kind I reserved for major client presentations. Today was important. Today, I wasn't just Natalie Hudson, their daughter-in-law. Today, I was their boss. By the time I left, Eleanor and Howard were already settled in their newly claimed offices, completely unconcerned about where their grandchildren had spent the night. I arrived at Hudson & Co. Realty's headquarters 15 minutes early. The boardroom was already buzzing with activity when Sandra, the board secretary, greeted me with a knowing smile. Mrs. Hudson, we've been expecting you. The board members are quite interested in your findings. I nodded, adjusting my jacket. I imagine they would be. Has anyone informed Eleanor and Howard about the meeting? Sandra smirked. Oh yes, they've been called in. They should be arriving any moment now. Right on cue, the office doors burst open. Howard and Eleanor rushed inside looking flustered. What's this about an emergency board meeting? Howard demanded, then froze when he saw me sitting at the table. Eleanor's face twisted in confusion. Natalie? What are you doing here? Before I could respond, the boardroom doors opened. Please, everyone, come in, Charles Montgomery, the board chairman, called. We have serious matters to discuss. Eleanor's eyes narrowed as she followed me into the room. Why is our daughter-in-law at a board meeting? Charles cleared his throat. Mrs. Hudson isn't just your daughter-in-law, he said smoothly. She is our majority shareholder. The color drained from both of their faces. Robert's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. It's impossible. We would have known. Would you? I asked, sliding copies of my ownership documentation across the polished mahogany table. Like you knew your company was failing? Like you knew your employees haven't received proper bonuses in 2 years while you continued paying for your golf club membership? Eleanor's hands trembled as she grabbed the documents, her eyes scanning the pages in disbelief. This has to be a mistake. This can't be legal. Oh, it's perfectly legal, Charles confirmed, his voice calm yet authoritative. Mrs. Hudson acquired the shares through various investment groups over the past 3 months, all above board, properly documented. I opened my laptop and connected it to the conference room's large screen. Now, I said, keeping my tone neutral, let's discuss management decisions, starting with these. Images of Ben and Lily's belongings scattered across the garage floor flashed onto the screen. Eleanor and Howard shifted uncomfortably in their seats. These photos demonstrate a concerning lack of judgment, I continued, my voice steady, professional. If this is how you treat your own grandchildren, the board has to wonder, how do you treat company resources? This is personal family business, Eleanor snapped. It has nothing to do with the company. Charles leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Character and judgment have everything to do with company leadership, he said. Mrs. Hudson has also brought to our attention some questionable financial decisions. I clicked to the next slide, revealing years of financial mismanagement, unnecessary expenses, and reckless spending. Howard and Eleanor visibly shrank in their chairs with every new revelation. The board has decided, Charles announced, glancing at the other members before turning back to them, effective immediately, to remove Howard and Eleanor Hudson from their positions as CEO and COO of Hudson & Co. Realty. Howard slammed his fist against the table. You can't do this. This company is our legacy. Was your legacy, I corrected smoothly, just like those bedrooms belong to my children. Funny how things change when someone with more power makes decisions without consulting you, isn't it? Eleanor turned to me, her eyes brimming with tears. Where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do? I tilted my head, pretending to think. The garage is perfectly fine, I said, repeating her own words from the day before. You're older, you'll adjust. I paused, gathering my papers. Although, you might want to start looking for a new place altogether. As of this morning, I've rescinded your invitation to stay in my home. Howard's face twisted in fury. James won't allow this, he bellowed. When our son hears about this. James already knows, I cut him off. I showed him the photos last night. He's the one who suggested I move up the timeline for this meeting. Their expressions turned to shock at this final betrayal. James had always been their safety net, the guarantee that they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. If you'll excuse me, I said, standing and straightening my jacket. I need to get home and help my children move their belongings back to their proper rooms. As I walked out of the boardroom, I heard Eleanor begin to cry, and Howard weakly arguing with Charles about severance packages. I felt no satisfaction, no distress. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences and protecting what mattered most. My phone buzzed, a text from James. How did it go? Just as planned, I replied. They're out of their positions. Are you still okay with having them move out? He asked. More than okay, he texted back. I should have stood up to them years ago. I'm sorry it took them hurting the kids for me to see who they really are. I pulled into the driveway where Ben and Lily were waiting with Aunt Rachel. Their faces lit up when I stepped out of the car. They can move back into their rooms, I told them, and the relief that washed over their faces was all I needed to know. Tonight, our home would finally be ours again. That's not what real family does, James finished, his voice steady but firm. Family isn't about control or guilt. It's about love, support, and making sure the people you care about feel safe. Lucas nodded, his shoulders relaxing a bit. Okay, he said quietly. I just didn't know if it made me a bad person. I reached over and ruffled his hair. Not at all, sweetheart. You're allowed to have feelings. You're allowed to be hurt. And you're allowed to move on. Emma still looked troubled, pushing the food around her plate with her fork. It's just, I don't get it. If they say they love us, why did they act like we didn't matter? James sighed. Some people think love means control, that as long as they say they're doing something for family, it doesn't matter who they hurt in the process. I squeezed Emma's hand. But love isn't about making people small so you can feel bigger. Real love lifts people up. And if someone can't understand that, then it's up to us to set boundaries. She nodded, a little more at ease. I'm glad they're gone, she admitted softly. So am I said. The next few weeks were peaceful in a way that we hadn't experienced in months. Without Eleanor and Howard dictating how we lived, our home finally felt like ours again. The house was quieter, but in the best way. No more tense conversations, No more whispered frustrations over dinner. I repainted Emma's walls a fresh yellow while she picked out a new bookshelf. Lucas got a new desk to replace the one they'd broken. The basement was reorganized back into storage, exactly how it was meant to be. Howard and Eleanor, meanwhile, had gone from anger to denial to bargaining. They still hadn't fully accepted that they had lost everything they had taken for granted. James kept me updated on their situation, but I refused to engage. When Howard sent a long-winded email about how I had ruined their lives, I deleted it without reading past the first line. When Eleanor tried calling, I blocked her number. I wasn't interested in their justifications. One afternoon, James came into the kitchen, his expression unreadable. He set his phone on the table in front of me. "They're running out of options," he said. "They're thinking of moving out of state to live with my aunt in Arizona." I took a sip of my coffee. "I hope it works out for them." "You really don't care?" I met his eyes. "I care about protecting my family. I care about the fact that our kids finally feel safe in their own home again. But about them?" I shrugged. "They made their choices. Now they have to live with them." James exhaled and nodded. "I think I finally get it now. I kept trying to find a way to fix things, but the truth is, they don't want to change." "No," I agreed. "They just want to go back to the way things were, where they could do whatever they wanted without consequences." That evening, as we sat down for dinner, Emma and Lucas laughed over something that had happened at school. The house felt warm, full of life again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. The next morning, I received an email from Charles Montgomery. The board had unanimously voted to rename Hudson & Co. Realty to Summit Consulting Group, marking a complete departure from the Hudson legacy. Attached was a photo of the new sign being installed at the company headquarters. A fresh start, in every sense of the word. I forwarded the email to Eleanor and Howard, adding only a short note. Sometimes, a fresh start is the best path forward. Eleanor's response came within minutes. "You think you've won, but you're teaching your children to be ruthless. One day, they'll do the same to you." I sat with her words for a moment before shutting my phone. She still didn't understand. That evening, as I walked through our home, I let the warmth of normalcy settle over me. Ben was at his desk, deeply focused on his science project, his room fully restored. Down the hall, Lily played piano, the soft notes floating through the house. These were the moments Eleanor and Howard had tried to steal. Not just rooms, but my children's sense of security and self-worth. James appeared beside me, slipping his arm around my waist. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I always thought keeping the peace with my parents was the right thing to do, but watching you stand up to them, showing our kids that they deserve to be protected, that's what real family leadership looks like." I leaned into him, feeling the tension of the last few months begin to fade. "They'll never doubt their worth again," I murmured. 3 months later, Summit Consulting Group posted its best quarter in 5 years. I had stepped back from day-to-day involvement, choosing to remain a silent majority shareholder, while new leadership brought in much-needed change. Eleanor and Howard had finally stopped trying to contact us, seemingly accepting that their actions had permanently altered our family dynamic. And as for Ben and Lily, they were thriving. The experience had taught them something invaluable, that they had the right to stand up for themselves. Just last week, Emma had confidently handled a bullying situation at school, telling a girl, "I don't have to accept being treated badly just because you think you have power over me." That evening, as I tucked Ben into bed, he looked up at me, thoughtful. "Mom," he asked, "are you ever going to tell us what happened to Grandma and Grandpa's company?" I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes, people think having power means they can treat others however they want, but real strength isn't about dominating people, it's about protecting what matters and standing up for what's right. He nodded, his young mind processing it all. "Like how you protected our rooms." "Exactly," I said with a smile, brushing his hair back before kissing his forehead. "And I always will." As I turned off his light, I thought about Eleanor's accusation, that I had been ruthless. She was wrong. Teaching my children that they deserve respect, that their boundaries matter, and that they don't have to accept mistreatment, even from family, wasn't ruthlessness, it was love. The company would continue to thrive under new leadership, but that was just business. The real victory was in our home, where my children slept peacefully in their own rooms, secure in the knowledge that they were valued, protected, and loved. Some would call it revenge, but I called it justice. The kind that heals and teaches, rather than destroys. And that, above all, was the most important legacy I could leave my children. I want to hear from you. After everything my family went through, I stood my ground, not just for myself but for my children. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up to someone who thought they had all the power? Maybe it was at work, within your family, or even among friends. Someone who took what was yours and expected you to just accept it. What did you do? Did you fight back? Did you walk away? If you could go back, would you have done? I had to make a choice, not just to reclaim my children's rooms, but to teach them their worth. I want to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in my place? Do you think I was too harsh? Or was it time for my in-laws to learn that actions have consequences? Let me know in the comments. I'm reading every single one. And if there's one thing you take from my story, let it be this: your boundaries matter. It's easy to let people walk all over you when they use the word family as a shield. But family isn't a free pass to disrespect, control, or take from you. Being related to someone doesn't mean they get to dictate your life, your space, or your happiness. You have the right to say no. You have the right to take back what's yours. If you're facing a similar situation, if someone in your life is crossing boundaries and making you feel small, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. You don't have to accept mistreatment just to keep the peace. True peace comes when you protect what matters, and that includes yourself and the people you love. So tell me, how have you stood up for yourself? Drop your story in the comments and let's keep this conversation going. Your voice matters.